Hey, everybody. All right. Let me make sure I have my comments. Hi, Tasha. Hey, it's CricketSong with Lunar Wisdom. You're live. We're talking today with Adam from The Witchy Show. Oh, I do have a little feedback now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's weird that it wasn't doing that before and now.
Well, if it gets bad, I'll just mute myself when you're talking.
Okay, cool. All right, so today we are live, yay, and here in the United States of America, it looks like Joe Biden Jr. is our new president-elect. Goodbye, Donald Trump. But this is not going to be a political chit-chat. We're chit-chatting live about witches, witchcraft, magic, and all that good shit. It's just really a casual chat today because Adam was going to be on my book launch, but things happened or I wasn't keeping it up, remember? And we wanted to have the chat to stay on my channel.
Yeah, that is true.
And then last week we were going to do a chat, but things here in my house kind of went a little drama with my daughter's work. So that took care of that whole day. Yeah. So here we are. Hey, Blood, Sweat, and Steel. You can see the chat, right?
Yeah, I can. I'm watching it as they come in.
Okay, good. Hi, Karina. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Everybody, if you didn't know, my book has been published. Yay.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Yay.
Oh, yay. 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 Check it out. It's available on Amazon right now in paperback and Kindle. So, yay. Adam's getting his copy soon. We're just waiting for the United States Postal Service to deliver it. Hi,
Forgive my hair.
Oh, your hair is gorgeous. Hey, Naked. Mercury was on its period or whatever. It's been like that here too. 2020. It's just been 2020 is what it's been. But yeah. So we're talking about witches, witchcraft, and magic today. And I'd like to continue doing lives at some point again. Yeah, I don't know. What things again, 2020, things are just a little crazy. Oh, and I am just gonna say, if you didn't see my tarot reading about Trump or Biden, you should go watch that video. Just saying. Second US presidential election in a row that I did predictions. Just saying. I was right.
So you're the Simpsons now?
Huh?
Are you the Simpsons now?
I don't know. Am I?
Oh, the Simpsons did an episode a long time ago where they predicted Trump becoming the next president, and the way he came down the stairs and everything was replicated in real life when he made his announcement.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, no, I'm just saying that when it was Trump or Clinton, I did a prediction 4 years ago, and my prediction came true. And this time around, my prediction came true as well.
4 years ago, you should have done some witchcraft to make that prediction not come true.
I know, unfortunately. And I tried to do it right on the same day, like the same day in October. I tried to be consistent. And the thing, my husband, when I did it, he goes, oh God, both times when I did the reading and I told him what happened. And he said that, pointed out that there were a lot of people in the comments this time around saying that I was just letting media sway me. The thing is, I hadn't watched any media coverage. I did the reading so that I wouldn't allow the media coverage to persuade me either way. So I didn't start watching media coverage until after I did the reading. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said something about the number 9 in the reading, that 9 was going to be prominent. That's something about the number 9. And then people in the comments started pointing out about the Supreme Justices. And I didn't know anything. I had no clue what they were talking about at the time until then I started, after I put the upload and did that. And then I went and looked at it and said, oh my God, yeah, that's probably what that was referring to.
This wasn't a reading, was it? It was you doing witchcraft, wasn't it? Don't lie to us.
I was dealing with other things that I had to do witchcraft about. Again, daughter's drama at work. I had to take care of that shit. That was most prominent. You did miss the book launch. I don't know how you missed it. I don't know, but I had a little virtual book launch party. It was fun. There is right now, and I think that the giveaway contest ends tomorrow. If you go over to my website, lunarwisdom.net or becomingwitch.com, there's an opportunity for you, if you live in the United States of America, to win an autographed copy. I'm giving away an autographed copy. So if you're in the US, head over there and you can enter to win except you, Adam. Well, you're not in the US anyway. And you already have.
Why the US only?
Because do you know how much shipping is?
Is it really that
United
much?
States? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry.
I feel bad for people who live in Europe.
Yeah.
They don't get to participate.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're just biased against Canadians.
I am not. I sent you a copy. Yours is not autographed, unfortunately.
That's okay. I'll pretend it is.
Okay. Yeah, you can just. You know what I can do? I can give you email you a scan of like the title page of it autographed, and then you can just replace the title page in yours. Biden is in the lead. Actually, they called he is our president-elect. It's been called by a couple of news sources that he is. Oh, yay. I hope a lot of people read it. And there is going to be supportive and supplemental content that I'm going to be releasing in regards to the book. So there'll be additional exercises, additional information, and ideally I want to have like a monthly call for people who are going through the exercises. Because the thing was, I was asked by a few people to do classes again. And I was like, well, if I do classes again, I'm not going to do 101. There's enough people out there teaching 101. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk to individuals who were already witches, who have an established practice. And then I went through my own transition when I moved here to Washington State, and I found how difficult it was for me to deal with that transition. I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm back into the swing of things, I want to be a support for people who have gone through the transition or who are going through a difficult time, and share with them my own experience and what worked for me. Not saying it's going to work for everyone, but here is a system that worked for me. Let me talk about it. Let me walk you through what I did and see if it helps you. And that's what this book is all about. So I'm writing for witches, not for newbies, not for people who are just starting out. I'm writing for witches. So if, you've gone through or are going through a difficult time, like dealing with illnesses,
like depression,
mental illnesses, or who have moved clear across country, or who are going through job transitions, or dealing with unemployment situations, or feeling like, am I even a witch anymore? I don't know. I'm so out of touch with my craft. CricketSong, I don't think I'm a witch anymore.
So you basically wrote this book for people like me. He's like, I'm writing this book specifically for Adam.
This book is written for Adam. All for Adam. But we all go through transitions. I mean, for me, the year coming from Massachusetts, settling here in Washington, I did not think it was going to be a difficult transition. I'm like, yeah, I'm just changing address. How is that going to?
You're losing. So what I have come to the conclusion of is when you're moving from one city to another, or even just across town or across the states, or across the world, you are losing that connection that you have built up with the spirits of that area. So like the spirits of the earth, the spirits of the dead, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And your entities, your deities, your energy, your magic is tied to the earth, as all witches are. And so we've tied ourselves to that specific spot. So when we move, it's almost as if you've cut off your arm. And now you're like, okay, I have to become a lizard and regrow it, or learn to live with just one arm. And as witches, we are kind of like lizards, right? So when we move from one place to the other, we're going to feel that transition. We're going to feel that loss. And it can be very devastating, and it can lead to some serious depression, especially if you are as involved in the craft as most of us witches are. And so when you move and you lose that connection, you have to find that connection again, or make a new connection. Because we are witches who are connected to the earth, as long as we're on the planet, we always have that connection. And even if we're off the planet, I'm assuming some spiritual way we'd have a connection to the earth. So we just have to tap back into that energy and just tap back into what it is that grounded us in the first place. And for some people, it's an incense that reminds them of where they came from. Some people, it might be going for a walk in the new woods and exploring things. It could be many things.
Yeah. And I think, with that move, it's different if you're just going from, if you're staying in the same city, you're still going to have a little bit of a shift.
Yeah.
But, and then even I'm thinking, even if I moved within the state of Massachusetts, I would have still felt a shift, but I don't think it would have been as great moving across country. I think if I would have stayed in New England, it might have felt more like home. But again, like, it's because exactly what you said, Adam, it's a connection to the energies and the nature spirits of that place. So a lot of New England, because it's sort of old school, it's dealing with a lot of, they're older cities. They're just older cities. Then here in Washington State, they're newer cities, different energies, different earth spirits, so different. And it really got me looking at my practice and having to approach it in a different way. So yes, exactly.
And the other thing to know, especially with the United States of America, if you know the history, it started on the East Coast. And so a lot of those buildings, a lot of that land, it has the history of war. It has the history of death. It has the history of the British. It has the history of the American people. It has the history of freedom, essentially, is what the States is built off of. So when you move from the East to the West, and remember, the West was settled much later than the East was, you're going to find that the spirits, the energy there, are less of the old world, if you will, and more of the new world. So it's going to take some adjustment for sure.
Well, let me tell you, I can tell you and this is just from my own practice, when I was on the East Coast, and even dealing with other witches, the approach to witchcraft is different from the people that I've met. Okay. So I'm talking, I was only an hour away from Salem. So there was a lot of connection. And one of the women I was really actually establishing a good relationship with, like a month before I left. I wish I would have met her so much earlier, but she had a connection to Salem. A lot of the witchcraft was dealing with the beloved dead, spirits, paranormal activity, spirits of the dead, cemeteries, all that kind of work. So a lot of necromancy, a lot of that spirit communication, spirit being, with the dead, table tippings and seances and Ouija boards and all that kind of connection and work.
Because it's very, oh, sorry, go on.
That's okay. Here, very different. My practice is not all about that anymore. Now, for me, it's connecting with the land spirits, the nature spirits. Again, I was also in a city, smack dab in a city in New Bedford. Here I am in Seattle. I am right in Seattle, but I am sort of in a neighborhood where there's more land. Like my neighbor, I look out my window, I'm not looking right into my neighbor's kitchen. That's how close I was in New Bedford, you know? Very different.
The other thing to notice is that the Eastern Coast is very, for the witches, a lot of their history comes from like the early 19th century, where the occult was really beginning to ramp back up. And there was a lot of, like you mentioned, seances, Ouija boards, table tipping, a lot of fraud, but a lot of it also was real. And one of the things that I find, especially with the southern and eastern states, is that it's very old school magic. It's not like today's millennial magic, where we want everything now, and we just jump into things. We don't do research. We're constantly posting everything on social media and all that other stuff. But I'm sure if you went back east or even southernly, you'd find that people are more resistant to share. They're more, this is how it's been passed down. It's more family oriented magic.
Yeah, here I've met more New Agers here, and so there's a lot more shops with like crystals and Akashic records and ascension and astrology, and not that any of that is not included in witchcraft, but back on the East Coast, it was more herbalism and apothecary and more, again, necromancy and that kind of thing. So even the aesthetic of what the witchcraft looks like is different from my perspective and my experience.
Somebody just said that they love the moonstones, that they got a package and they're thanking you very much for it. What's the moonstones, if you don't mind me asking?
I didn't send. Oh, hey, Kimmy. I didn't send moonstones.
Oh, maybe they just love moonstones. And
oh, I have a. Oh, I won't like this.
She's just flipping off the crowd.
I was gonna, right? I love this ring. I bought it here a few months ago.
I had an English teacher that would point at everything with his
middle finger. Oh, his middle finger.
And I'm like one day I asked him, I was like, can you please use your index finger? It looks like you're flipping me off. He's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm so used to it.
Yeah, I sent Kimmy was in the book launch, so she entered the giveaway contest I had during the book launch. And even though she didn't win the autographed copy, I did send her a complimentary package. So I'm glad you got it, Kimmy. Yay.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is that, again, going back to comparing East to West. So the East is very, like I said, old school kind of magic, whereas the West, especially in the 70s, when it was becoming more occultist, was more of a new agey, what I call hippy dippy magic. So
I know you call it that.
It was, and it's not like I'm calling all new age practitioners that. It's just that around the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, when the witchcraft was more coming towards the West, it became very boiled down, very simplistic, very like wave around a sage stick to get rid of evil spirits and all of that stuff, which I have a video coming to say that sage is a lie. But aside from that, so the West has just become very boiled down kind of concepts. Crystals are super expensive. Sage sticks are super expensive because it's all about making money at the end of the day, right?
Well, I think too, you have to look at what's on this side of the US. So a lot of the population here is influenced by Asians. So Japan and all the Asian countries, India. So the influence on the magic here, you're going to get, if someone's coming from India and they're a magical practitioner, their magic is going to look like their culture. If you came from Japan and you're practicing magic, your magic is going to have the flavor of your culture. So we have a lot of that. Then coming up from Mexico, you'll have a lot of that type of magic. Then Mount Shasta is here. So then you have a lot of ley line and a lot of that kind of new age things happening. And that's where I think ascension, a focus on ascending the spirit, All of that kind of stuff is happening here. And if you're practicing magic, you will probably include some of that if that's what you were brought up. If your mom and dad were hippies, literal hippies, if they were into free love and unity and peace, and then your magic, if those were your parents and that was your influence, is going to reflect that. Where you go back to East Coast, very rigid, very traditional in, you know, the English way of doing things, or even whatever cultures are coming over from there. In the city I lived in, there was a lot of Portuguese individuals. So a lot of my clients that I dealt with, we're coming from that sort of perspective. Portuguese, they were looking for brujas, you know, which it kind of went along with what I was practicing and what I was more used to. So it's just a shifting for me.
Yeah. I find that like the middle states, like the ones in between the East and the West, they are a mixture of both types. And it's not like it's a oil and water. It's more like a water and a colored water, and they just get mixed together. One of the issues that I tend to have with a lot of new age stuff is that, like I said, it's very boiled down, it's very simplistic, and it's made in a way where millennials and people younger than me can digest it and get into it. But I feel like without the history, without the context, it's like you're actually losing something.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you do. But then, as I think you and I have both always said, Adam, it's important for you to make your magic your own.
Exactly.
So, I mean, whether you could lose things in what you were pulling from, but if everything has a meaning for you, and you know why you use rosemary, or you know why you use cedar, not because Scott Cunningham said to, or not because some TikToker said, or some YouTuber influencer said to use sage, you know why you're using what you're using, and you have a strong understanding of what that means and how it is reflected in your magic and your craft.
I think a lot of people don't actually have that solid foundation, especially people on TikTok, Instagram, and to some degree, very tiny these days, because the witchy community has evolved, but to some degree, even on YouTube, but mostly Facebook groups. It really seems in the age of social media that people not only have come together to discuss various topics that they're interested in, but also to come together to try and dictate how certain things are supposed to be done. And maybe that works in your craft. Maybe you need to dictate how your craft works, but you can't dictate how other people's craft works. And the other problem is that people aren't doing their research anymore. They're expecting to go onto Facebook, post a question, or maybe the most common example is candle readings. Everybody and their mother's dog is doing candle magic these days, which is fine. But the problem is that some of you aren't doing the research necessary to understand how to properly read a candle. Now, it's one thing to say, here's my candle, this is how I've read it. I'm curious to see if somebody sees something similar or different. But what most people post is, here's my candle, it's the first time I've ever done a candle spell, I have no idea what I'm doing, and can you read it? Like, no.
That's just like tarot readings. You can definitely do that with tarot readings. Hey, I just got this deck of tarot cards. I pulled these 3 cards. I have no idea what it means. I looked in the book. I don't understand. Can someone tell me what it means?
So that one's actually appropriate. Like if you're saying, I've looked in the book says it means this, I'm curious, like, what does it mean in this context? Like the problem is
this context, though,
when you don't give context is when the problem becomes. Because if, like you said, if you just pull 3 random cards and you read the book and then you go online, right, there's going to be thousands of different answers that can be given to you. I mean,
exactly.
It's the same thing when I'm doing my own tarot readings, and sometimes I get tripped up on the cards, so I'll go and look up the meaning of the card.
But that's different. You've done research.
Sorry, I was going to say where I'm going with that is that I have done the research. I've done the class with Lunar Wisdom. I've gone through the exercises, but a lot of people haven't, and they just want to jump into it because their friend on Instagram or their friend on YouTube is showing off these tarot decks. I mean, there was a time when Ember Honeyraven had like 40 tarot decks, and I'm not saying that she's the reason why all these people have tarot decks. I'm saying that people who, how do I put this politely without offending her? When you show things off on YouTube and people see that, some people will go out and try to replicate that, which is not an issue at all. However, those same people don't do the research. That's not on Ember Honeyraven, that's on them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right, because it's just like doing a big witchy haul. You buy all this shit, you go on YouTube, you show your witchy haul, then other people want to run out and go buy the same shit because they think it's that's going to make them be you, and that's not the case.
And so, everybody has to realize that when you become a witch, when you go down this path, right, it's individual. It's never going to be the same as anybody else's. You can try as hard as you want to replicate Tequila's craft or Ember's craft or Lunar's craft. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be the same experience. You're not going to have the same experience with the spirits that they work with. You might not even have an experience at all, or you might have a violent experience, right? So like when I work with the Morrigan, it's vastly different than other people who work with the Morrigan.
Exactly.
Right? So...
well, that's the same. I think that's important because to look at, because even though we can trace, in my opinion, we can trace back all our energy, everybody is unified, and witches who are aware and who are practicing, we are also unified, but just like a hand. So all us witches are part of this hand, but Adam is this finger, I'm this finger, Amber Honeyraven is that finger, maybe Tequila is that finger, and maybe Solitary Luna is this finger. So we're all different fingers, but we all comprise the hand. So we're all working with the same energies, but we're doing it in very different ways. And if you look at us, we're all individual people, but at the base, we're all connected to this same energy. So the way that we work with the energies is going to be different because we are an individual, but we're all working with that same energy. So we're all unified.
Exactly. Like I said at the beginning, we're all connected to the earth. It doesn't matter where you go on this earth, you are still connected to the earth. You may lose some aspect that you are deeply connected with, like in the case of you mentioned in Massachusetts, the beloved dead, whereas out here it's the spirits of the land. So I live near 3 cemeteries, and so I use the beloved dead and the spirits of the land and all of that fun stuff. If I were to move across the city away from these graveyards, I might lose that connection with the beloved dead, or it may be weaker for me. So then in that case, I would recognize that and try and substitute it with more earth magic. Because where I'd like to move to the city is by a very forested area.
I like this this comment by Amelia. Tools don't make the practice makes the tools. I love that. You know, whether that's stones, whether that's cards, whether that's whatever it is that you're working with, the accoutrements or the tools that you purchase, definitely there's something that you're going to work with. Just like the hammer doesn't make the carpenter uses the hammer for their work.
The other thing that I talked about this in an upcoming video at some point, but there was this issue on TikTok that I saw where a lot of these younger witches were going out and buying very expensive, elaborate tools. Like I think one was showing off like a $350 athame, and that's fine. I mean, most of us are probably using a butter knife or a steak knife, or our index finger, or maybe we don't use one at all. And what I have found is that that's not the issue. The issue is when they start flaunting it. Kind of like how the rich, think of Kim Kardashian recently, right? She went on that big, expensive private island trip. Everybody flipped their shit. And it wasn't because she got to do it. It was because they realized that the wealthy during a pandemic are able to do things that we, the normal people, or the peasants, if you will, what we're not able to do. So when we see somebody, or at least this is my opinion, when I see somebody flaunting something on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, not only do I get a little jealous, which is a normal human response, but I also get a little angry because you're basically just flaunting your privilege around without actually having anything to do with the craft at that point. You're just spending money on things and showing it off and kind of rubbing it in our faces because what, you can?
I don't know. I don't perceive it in that way. But again, we're all going to perceive things differently because of our own experience. When I see someone showing off their 325 whatever dollar athame, number one, I'm like, wow, what a waste of money. You know what I could have done with that? Two, I might say, huh?
Bought groceries.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Or I would, and then I might think, oh, that's a beautiful athame, but I would not have spent that much for it because how often am I going to use it? And then then I think I'd be curious as to what the rest of their practice looks like. You know, what kind of practice are they practicing?
Yeah. It wasn't necessarily like a dig at people who are like, look at my $350 athame. It was more of a dig at people who are like, you need this athame to do your magic, like this specific athame. And it's like, no, you don't. I saw that twice on TikTok, and it has been growing, especially in the witch talk community on there, that specific hashtag where a lot of people will buy elaborate, expensive things and they'll shove it in your face and shove it down your throat. And it's one of those things where it's like, look, I'm better than you. And it's like, no, you're not better than us. Like, what are you even using the athame for? And why can't you use a butter knife?
I think there is certain traditions and certain practices where there is a specific type of tool you need to use in order to practice that specific type of witchcraft. Whether it's $325 or not, I don't know, because that's not the path I chose to go down when I started practicing witchcraft. But I do think that, and I also have seen, not on TikTok, but in my years of being in the community, that there are certain individuals who are very insecure, who only get their security in doing that type of thing, like needing to prove to others that they're valid through that type of behavior.
That makes me kind of, this is kind of controversial, that makes me wonder the authenticity, which is just a quoted word for real. Like, I don't want to say that they're fake or they're not a real witch, because that's not fair. Because everybody who claims to be a witch, I mean, you claim to be whatever you want. It's your God-given right to do that. But at the same time, when you start to see this kind of behavior where maybe they appear on YouTube and then, you know, 3 months later, there's a Patreon, and a month later, their entire altar behind them that used to have nothing is blown up with fancy stuff, right? Like, that makes me question the legitimacy of their claims, but not in a way where I would just instantly go on YouTube and be like, this person who blew up their altar with Patreon is fake, right? It just makes me question the authenticity.
Well, I think that's healthy. I mean, but I understand that what we see on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook is only what we, the content creators, choose to show you. You know, if someone has a blown up altar or these beautiful photos on Instagram of these perfectly placed altars, that isn't necessarily their real altar that they do work on. You know, you're seeing what the creator chooses you to see.
Yes, but it's at the same time, that's kind of like, if I showed up to your house looking like a complete mess, right? And it was the first time we've ever met or ever talked, your first impression of me will not be a good one. So that's where I was going with this. It's, we don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes, but when you show us enough of yourself, right, and you keep repeating the same kind of behavior over and over again, it's like this Grey's Anatomy saying, where it's like, you believe what they show you. You believe that this is the person that you would see in real life, right?
Well, so, that's up to you. I mean, that's what you choose to believe about that person. I mean, this person, whoever they are putting forth a persona. I mean, even I and you, we have personas that we show YouTube. To be 100% honest with you all, I'm not going to show you my working. I'm not going to show you my spell casting. You'll see demonstrations. You'll see me doing something knowing that I'm recording it for YouTube. But if I'm doing an honest sit down working, you're very select if I choose to include you in that. But I think, honestly, that's how all witches are, because whatever you put out there can be used against you.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of my videos, because I am the type of person that will show you the workings and I will walk you through putting the intentions in and everything. But if I were to ever post the recording date, you'll know that it's a week or a few days behind, because in my opinion, if you upload a video of you doing a candle working, for example, let's say there's some woman down the street that you're trying to get rid of out of your neighborhood for whatever reason, and you show that working, and maybe she's a witch who's on YouTube and watches YouTube or whatever, she could see that working if it's the same day and start, you know, doing magic against it. Whereas if it's pre-recorded, it's harder to target that kind of magic.
Right. But still, even I think on yours, Adam, you don't open the mic and we don't hear everything you're saying. It's usually a voiceover, because some things are meant, right, but some things are meant to be private, and even then you're not going to see every second of every working, because that's, I would honestly, I don't know, I think honestly it's foolish to show every single thing that you're doing in your magic.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to show an entire ritual, and I mean, some of my videos can be pretty long when I do working videos, but like even the longest working video I have, if I were to show you everything of that, it would be probably 3 or 4 times the length, right? And I know that there are other witches on the internet. The biggest one that can come to my mind right now is E.A. Coetting, where he does show you everything, the conjurations and all of that.
He says he shows you everything. Exactly. Because again, the creator is only showing you what they want to show you. And
his is very theatrical.
I know.
Which is fine. I mean,
I enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's entertaining for sure. A couple of things before the comments keep flowing away. I absolutely agree with you, Cricket. Even personally, I do things wildly different from most other witches do. So does that mean that as an occultist, blacksmith, oh, where did the rest go? Well, clearly he does things differently. And I wanted to point this out because we were talking about everybody's witchcraft is different. So yes.
Yeah, it's further down. So he says,
just right here.
Yeah.
Blacksmith, and you've never heard of that, doesn't mean it is not witchcraft. It's just my way, not better, not worse, just different. Exactly.
It sounds like he, and I don't know his craft at all, but I'm just going to make an assumption here. It sounds like he uses his blacksmithing to enchant the items, which is really cool. I mean, we can put magic into anything. I mean, there's witches out there, right? I mean, you're cooking up a steak, you're putting some intentions into it for your family. Or there's housewives who might do a floor wash every week or whatever it is, or wash the laundry a certain way or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. And he even says that his first athame or athame was a dollar store letter opener.
That's the best kind.
Exactly. Hey, Obsidian. Oh, heart for you. Obsidian Fire is in the chat. There was something, Adam, that we were talking about a while ago. Oh, in your live stream, I was in chat and you were talking about it. And what was it? Because I was quoting the back of my book. What were we talking about?
I was ranting and raving about a specific person and ranting and raving about, the thing I think I was talking about is the loss of connection and how.
Yes, let's talk about that.
So the thing that I was talking about, so I'm going to get a little controversial here for a second, is that in my opinion, a real witch, okay, not somebody who just calls themselves a witch or buys all the fancy stuff, but an actual practicing witch, and Lunar Wisdom said this perfectly, you as a witch shapes your identity. You are always a witch. It is part of who you are. You can never lose that. And I did kind of add on to that and say, unless you just kind of do what some religious people will do when they don't want to be a Christian anymore and they go atheist, they just completely disassociate everything. But in my mind, when you're one thing, whether you're a Christian, a witch, a Wiccan, a whatever, you're always that for life. It's in your blood, it's in your veins. You may walk away from it, but it's always still there, even just as a whisper in the back of your mind. And so people who, and I've done this live and I've done this publicly, where I say I don't feel like a witch anymore. I feel like all of my connections, everything is gone. But at the same time, what you kind of have to realize is that just because you've lost a connection with something, maybe you haven't moved. Maybe you're just sitting at home and all of a sudden the spirits are gone. And you have to realize that there are going to be times in your life where it's quiet. And those are the times where it's for self-reflection and introspection on where you're going with your path, where you're going in life and all of that stuff. I mean, if we're witching 24/7, 365, we're never going to have time for that introspection and that reflection. So I think that's why sometimes, and this is just my opinion, there's no science or evidence to back it up, but I think sometimes the spirits and our entities will step back. And we will feel that void. We will feel that loss. But that's for us to turn inwards and reflect on where we've been, where we've come to, and where we're going.
Yeah, the quote on the back of the book, right up here, is what I had said to Adam. It's witches who they are and who they're becoming at their core. It's how we live. It's how we think, act, and speak. It isn't something that we can separate from ourselves, because witch is the self. So it's definitely, so when you're feeling that void, when you're feeling as if you're not connected anymore, or the spirits have stepped away, or your matron and patron goddesses, maybe you're in a transition with them. Maybe you don't feel them around anymore. That doesn't mean you're not witch, because witch is a perspective. It's how you think about things. It's how you act with other people, how you interact with your environment. It's how you speak about things. You know, witches, we have certain vocabulary we use. Even if you're in your usual day job, there are certain ways in which we perceive the world, the universe, spirits, and everything that is interwoven. And you can't really separate it, because it permeates everything about you, because it is you.
Mm-hmm. So Cindy B said, just like a retrograde. And in my opinion, it's not really like a retrograde. It's the absence of the craft. So as Lunar Wisdom put it perfectly, I mean, a witch is always a witch. It's who you are. But the craft is the practice of being a witch. And so when people talk, and I think what happens a lot, especially when mental health enters the situation, is that when we feel depressed, when we feel miserable, when we get sad, and I don't mean like tears, I mean weather sad, right? What happens is that we lose the connection with the craft, and we lose the connection with the earth and the spirits, not in a way where we can't reconnect. It's just we might step back from our craft because our life is hectic, right? So like with the car issues I've been having, with the work issues that I was having with the payment and stuff like that, I stepped back from my craft. Normally, these are situations where I would run to the altar, but I knew that these were out of my hands. And that's the other thing that witches have to realize, is that we can't always witch through everything. Sometimes things are out of our hands, out of our deity's hands, and we have to let it be. And sometimes doing magic on a particular situation could make it worse, right? Especially if we're trying to hurry something up that should actually take its time so that the steps aren't skipped. Right?
Well, I want to disagree a little bit with this.
No.
Yes. Okay. So I think we have to go back again to what we mean as being witch. I do agree with the point of when you're dealing with depression or other mental illness, or just physical health, you know, if you're physically ill, not mentally ill, or you have lost a job and you're seeking unemployment, or you moved across country and you're feeling not being grounded anymore and you're just at a loss. You're trying to figure out what your place is in the new place that you're living, what your new role is. Taking a step back from the practice, the actual spell casting, that I agree that and I think what people are saying when they feel like they're not a witch anymore, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
The perspective of being witch, I don't think changes unless, say, you have decided to change religions. Say you've gone from being witch and now you're going to become Roman Catholic. That is a totally different perspective that you're choosing to take. The way a Roman Catholic views the world can be, not always, but can be very different than a witch's perspective. Although you can be a Catholic witch. So again, we're going to that can be different. It depends on if say you're an atheistic witch. That is different than working with deities. So those are different perspectives. So from my perspective, being witch, if there are things that I am not actively casting spells for, I'm not at my altar doing the work, the witchcraft stuff, the craft stuff, my perspective doesn't change. I still view the world in a different way than my mom and dad do, who are devout Roman Catholic. I believe I always have direct manipulation of the energies around me. I do believe I always have a say. I don't believe that it's out of my hands ever. I always believe, unless we're dealing with, if I'm trying to help Adam's stuff is out of my hands. But my stuff, not my children's things, not my husband's things.
My apologies.
Oh, sorry, Siri. Nothing. I wasn't talking to you.
Siri will do that sometimes to me as well. Siri will pop up and be like, oh, I'm sorry. What did you say?
No, yeah, I'm not talking to you, Siri. But someone's answering what I'm saying, right? I believe I always have a say in what's happening for me, whether I'm petitioning the gods, whether my matron or patron, if I had one, were working with me. I always have input. I always have say. I can go with what they're suggesting. I can fight what they're suggesting. The spirits can decide if I'm working with demons, if I'm working with angels, if I'm working with beloved dead, if I'm working with the ancestors, if I'm working with the nature spirits. I'm working with them. I don't believe as witch I give up control to anything ever. But that's my sovereignty as witch.
So I didn't mean like in the case where you don't have control over situations where you can't witch through. Like what I meant is, so I'll use my car stuff as an example.
Okay.
So I've been having issues with the transmission and the brakes in my car. I mean, there were a whole host of other issues, but those ones, if I did Magick and was like, I want the mechanic to fix this really quickly so I can get back on the road, right? He might, especially with where I go, he might overlook something and he might not see something that was there, or maybe the spirits stop it from being able to be replicated because I want the car back really quickly, right? Mm-hmm. So in those particular cases is where I put it out of my hands and into, I guess, the universe's hands to do with as they will without any input from me. Those are times where I think that, in my opinion, Magick can't help, is when there's situations that you need them to play out without interference, if that makes sense. And there's very few of those situations in our lives. Like we couldn't witch through our father who's on his deathbed. Like
no, because that's your father's thing. That's not your thing.
Well, no amount of magic is going to stop him from dying.
Just no, because I disagree. He himself could, if he was witch, if he was aligned with the magic, if he was living as witch, it's not just because being witch is a lifestyle. It's a perspective of life. if your father, my father, whoever's father we're talking about, if that individual was witch, I do believe that that individual could work magic to manipulate the energy in order to make a change if they truly didn't want to die yet. But you have to do the internal work before any of that magic would work. I mean, it's being what?
The mundane.
Well, not only the mundane, but the internal. I have a video discussing the internal work. It's discussing the internal working of the witch. Go check it out if you haven't watched it. If you're watching this and you want to know more of what I mean, go. I'll put the link in later on.
I consider anything that is like not spellcrafting to be mundane. So there may be a difference between internal and doing like mundane work, but I just consider it all to be
okay. So mundane to me is the actual, if we're talking about getting a job, it's putting the application in. It's going to, that's mundane. Internal working is looking internally and really asking yourself if you want a job to begin with. Like shadow working and all that, aligning yourself with what you truly want out of life.
And that's what I call the magician's true will.
Okay. So that needs to be addressed, because you could do the mundane and then you can go to your altar and cast. But if you haven't done the internal work, then that's not going to manifest. So
and that's why I think, yeah. And a lot of my job spells when I got laid off, for those like during the pandemic, which is still ongoing. But when I was laid off, a lot of my magic would fizzle. And the first things that I would turn to, aside from applying for jobs, is reversal spells, opening of doors, finding me a job, keeping the money flowing, all of that stuff. But I knew in the back of my mind that I needed time off. Because I was working so much and I was so burnt out, but I kept trying to push the magics forward. And I guess that's where the internal part comes in, because as I call it, the magician's true will was basically, I didn't really want a job. Exactly. And then when I knew that the money was running out and I couldn't keep going in the direction I was going, I was like, okay, now we do need a job. And now I actually want a job. And that's when things started to manifest. So I think that could actually go back to a discussion of why do spells sometimes fail? And it's because you might have gone out and applied for the jobs, you might have done the magic, but what is your true desire? What are you really actually asking for?
Right. So, I mean, exactly. But going back to what you had originally discussed with the idea of, there are things that magic can't help you and you just let it go or give it up or it's out of your hands. I don't believe it's ever out of the witch's hands, because the witch is working a certain perspective. I mean, if the witch has gods that they work with, or the witches saying that they're going to give it to their spirits, their spiritual army that they work with, they are choosing to hand it over. And that's the witch working with the relationships that they've established. But that's still the witch asserting that his or her power in that situation. I guess when I hear phrases like, I just, give it up, or I let it go, it smacks to me, or it triggers me to think the whole idea of let go, let God. And that's totally a different perspective than what I have as witch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's going to be different for every witch and how they perceive this. But for me, a lot of the times, the reason I say that it's out of my hands is because a lot of the times, the things that I want to do or I want to manifest, I'll go to the altar and I'll meditate on it. And the first person to pop into my brain is always the Morrigan, and she's always like, I don't think you need this. And then we'll go do a tarot reading and it will be obvious why I don't need it or why we're going in a direction. And again, sometimes we will fight our deities and be like, no, I want this. But at the end of the day, you can't fight your true desire. So if you're fighting the deity to get something, but your true desire, the whisper in the back of your head is saying, I don't actually want this, or I want something different, then your spell could fizzle, or it could backfire epically, or it might work, but it might be a very short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Yeah, yeah, because I think when you have a really good relationship, a working relationship with deity or with spirits or whoever in the unseen realms, the witch has these relationships. It's built on, communicating and give and take. Then the deity or the spirit is in alignment with the true witch self or the magician's true will. There's an alignment going on there. Even if the witch is in denial or the witch is sabotaging their own desire, that's when that higher self or deity comes in to remind the witch of what is best for the witch in that time at that moment.
And that's why I do a lot of tarot readings these days, especially with the Morrigan, to figure out, okay, what's happening, what's upcoming. And as I've talked about in previous videos, the only spread that I use is the Celtic Cross. Not because I don't know any other spreads, but because it's the most clear, concise explanation of what's happened, what's happening, and what's the outcome if I keep going down the same path that I am. And with the Morrigan, I mean, she is as blunt and honest as you can expect her to be.
I don't work with a specific deity at this point. I kind of hear a whisper, but it's and the deities are in my peripheral. Like I can sort of see whispers or shadows of a deity, a personified deity coming close to me. But at this point, in my practice, in my craft, where I am, it's important for me to work without that sort of safety net because, again, I'm in a place where the energy is very wild. It's very feral. It's very visceral here, the energy, especially in the place that we're living in where the house is right now in this neighborhood. It's a very wild energy. And I think it's best for my witch self to experience the unstructured and the fierce, wild energy, and not have a safety net of a god or goddess. So I could say, oh, help me. I need that.
And for the longest time, I never had that safety net. It was when I started working with the saints that I thought that, okay, things will start to get, no. And it was around the time that the Morrigan came into my life, but she's not really one of those entities that is going to, like I said before, she's not going to sit on your altar and wait for you to call upon her. She's got other things to do. So half the time she's never around. And the other half the time when she is, it's for like a quick minute to either tell you to stop being stupid or to tell you that you're going in the wrong direction or whatever. And then there's times where you might be working magic and you might call upon her. I mean, half the time I call upon the spirits as opposed to calling upon the Morrigan because I don't need that sword to slice through a particular situation unless it's finding another job or something.
Yeah. I find, at least for me at this time, there's a lot of the nature spirits have a lot of influence over what's going on. So I guess it's time to look into Fae and all that kind of stuff for me.
Amelia said something interesting. She's like, if I live in a distracting environment.
Yeah, I was looking at that. That was my next thing. First, before I talk to that, I just wanted a naked dancing heathen. When deity says, let me take care of this. If you take care of this, you go into jail. I like that. Exactly. Yeah. So Amelia, so if I live in a distracting environment and doing spells to move, the spells may not work if something that takes time is already in progress. That makes sense.
Well, so where I was going with that, like, so if you're trying to move from a distracting environment, whatever kind of environment that is, and you're doing the mundane and, as Lunar would put it, the internal work, and you're doing the magic, right? I mean, where I say that it's out of your hands is kind of like those people who will do 30 spells for a situation that isn't moving quickly enough, like 1 or 2 spells, right? And giving it time to manifest. That's where it's also out of your hands. It's like if you've said, let's say you call upon the Morrigan, you're like, I need help getting out of the situation and moving to a different place. She's going to come in and slice everything down. You could lose your job, you could lose your place, you could be forced to move right away, if that's the type of deity that you're working with. Same with Clonic. And so with those things, when you say, like you said earlier, when you say, okay, I'm putting this in your hands, it is out of your hands. You've given it to somebody or something to deal with. In that case, I wouldn't turn around and do another spell right away to make it manifest faster. I would let that one play out and do my divination.
Well, here's what I would say. Let's talk about the idea that magic takes the path of least resistance. I think we're all in agreement with that, right? Just like electricity. Electricity, you know, if you have a lightning rod up and, you know, you're trying to harness the energy of electricity, it's going to look for the path that it's easiest for it to travel, which is why you don't stand in the bathtub with an open outlet and, you know, plug something in, because
I do that all the time.
you know, so magic will take the path of least resistance. So how resistant are you to that will, that true desire that you have?
It might not also be you. It could be environmental factors or other things.
Yeah, hold on. If you are in alignment with what it is you truly desire, and you've done the internal work, you've removed all internal obstacles. Shadow work is a big part of that internal work. You've removed all obstacles and you say, I want XYZ. And I really want it. I am honest. I think about it every day. I taste it in my mouth. I want XYZ. I can visualize myself with XYZ. And I've checked to make sure everything I'm doing, the external work, the mundane work, is in alignment with XYZ. I can see from here to there. There is no resistance. Then, as Adam pointed out, what is my environment doing? Is there outside influences trying to, like a football game, block me to get to XYZ?
Road opener would help.
Exactly, because then that's going to take away all the outside influences of what's going on. If you are living in that distracting environment, those things, like Adam said, a road opener will get rid of those. Then that line from point me to my outcome will work, and I will only have to do one spell. And if I'm living in alignment with my true witch self or my true will, magic will, my spells will manifest so quick. I know this from personal experience.
There could be one
There
could be one other thing that could stand in your way. You may have aligned yourself with everything. You may have done all the internal work. You may have done all the external work. You may have cast the road opener. You may have cast the spell itself. But if your deity or spirits is saying no to something, they could step in between you and that thing that you want. It depends on the situation, though. I mean,
but if from my perspective, if my deity is in alignment with my true will, my witch self, which I've already established, I believe that when we work with deities, they're in alignment with our true witch self at that time, which is why sometimes we have matron and patrons that change for us, because our true witch self is ever becoming. It's ever evolving. So our matron and patrons will change with that. But our matron and patrons or our spiritual allies that we work with are in aligned with that true self, which we may not even recognize. They're in alignment with that. So if that outcome is something we really desire and is in alignment with our true witch self, our deities, our spirit allies will be working to help us achieve that, because they know what our true witch self wants, even if we don't recognize it ourselves. That's my perspective on that. So the only things that would be obstacles for us are ourselves, not the true witch self, but the physical, egotistical self, and outside influences that we allow to influence us. That's my
I
perspective.
I find in at least in my craft and in my practice is that sometimes a situation can play out like the moon card, and sometimes a situation can play out like the sun card. So with the sun, the way that I interpret the sun is that you see everything. You can see clearly, and everything is in perspective, and you can just go right on forward. And then there's sometimes where it's the moon. So you may be able to see pretty far and pretty clearly, but there's things that you can't determine, you can't see.
Because you don't see it, because you choose not to see it, but it's there in the shadows. You're just not looking in the
I
shadows.
don't agree with that. I mean,
that's how I read that, because
yeah.
the moon is, there are things there, but you can't see it because you're not really in alignment with your true witch self. The sun is you in alignment with your true witch self.
You might be aligned with your true self, but there could be other external factors that you don't know about.
External factors that you allow to influence you, because the witch is always in control if they are in alignment. And I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do, because we're human beings. We're human beings living in a physical world. We're influenced by so many things. We are constantly bombarded by external influences. It is very difficult to find that inner guidance. But those things that come to us quickly, those things that you go, damn, I just did that spell last night. Fuck me, look it's right there in front of me right now. Whoops, can't, it's not gonna.
Well, you just lost monetization,
right? I can bleep it. Those things are those things that I am in alignment with. The other things that take a spell and maybe is not manifesting, and next moon phase I got to do another spell for it, and oh my god, why isn't it? That time to reevaluate what's going on. Why? Oh, because I'm afraid that if this manifests, my husband will be upset, or if I manifest this, then I feel like I'm taking from someone else.
In those cases, you're blocking yourself. In those cases, like if you're afraid, oh, if I manifest this, my husband will be upset, or this person will be upset, you're blocking yourself.
That's right.
And
that's also outside influences. I'm allowing my friend or my children or my husband or my parents or my boss or
what is the reason behind those thoughts? It can't just be outside influence, because if you're having those thoughts, they're coming from within, which means that you probably aren't aligned with the magician's true will, which means that the spell will probably fail. So you have to get to the bottom of, why am I having the self-doubt? And once you solve that problem, then you will figure out, oh, okay, this is why, and now I can put it aside and deal with these things.
Right, exactly. We here in the US, outside influences could be government, media, it could be the president at the time influencing outside influence.
I find the biggest influence on the witchy community is social media. It makes some of us feel less than. It makes some of us feel like we're not real enough, not authentic enough. And it goes back to that whole, you're only seeing what they show you. But that also goes back to, well, it's the first time I've ever seen this image. This is the first impression that I have of this person. This must be how their craft works. I mean, I have nothing else to compare it to, and their craft looks prettier. I feel less than, I feel less worthy. My spells may start to fizzle or not work because I'm allowing that outside influence to affect me internally, which then leads to depression, mental health issues, which then leads to you stepping back from your altar, feeling like you're less than, feeling like you're not a witch anymore. And it's just this toxic, vicious cycle that once you get into that is very, very difficult to break.
Right. All outside influences only affect us if we allow them to affect us. But the outside influences are built in a way and are manufactured and constructed in a way to affect us. So the things that you find that affect you are built to affect you. And sometimes the only way to stop that whole cycle is to not open yourself up to those
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Most advertising is sex sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get beautiful women who are with these beautiful men that are trying to sell you something. They're basically saying, hey, if you buy this, you can be like us. And a lot of that can translate to the witchy community with hauls and superficial items and people showing things off, which isn't bad. However, it can lead to a sense of feeling less than. And I think some of that stems from a little bit of jealousy. And I think some of that stems from your own issues that you've had either since childhood, probably since childhood, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And in those situations, I think it's important for us to realize that we are individuals and we're not the Borg, okay? We're not here to assimilate everybody. That's advertising, right? So we just have to find that time to separate ourselves. And in the age of technology where our phones are computers in our pockets, it's really easy to be on the bus, pull out your phone, open Instagram, see somebody's fancy altar and be like, oh, mine doesn't look like that. Oh, they're working magic like this. My magic isn't like that. Am I less than? Am I worse than? And the answer is no. Obviously not. And sometimes maybe the shoe fits.
I would say, I mean, if you're looking at other people's way that they practice, my litmus test for myself is my magic working for me? Am I casting or doing magical workings, or am I getting what I want? And if the answer is yes, my magic is working and I am seeing the changes that I want to see, then who cares what someone on Instagram or someone on TikTok or someone on YouTube is doing if it looks different? If my magic is working for me and I am manifesting what I want for me in under my terms in the way I want it, then it's working for me. If it's not, then go back and see what isn't working and why it isn't working for me.
If your magic's not working for you, that's literally, I can't put this any other way. That's literally a you problem.
Yeah.
It could be that you don't have a strong enough relationship with your deity. Maybe you just jumped into bed one night with your deity, right? Like not literally, but figuratively. Or maybe literally if you were.
I was going to say maybe literally.
But sometimes, right, like you may not have that connection. A lot of what we see on social media makes us want to develop something similar. We want to be samey as everybody else. And I think that's what advertising and social media platforms are trying to do. They're trying to push the society in one direction, right? And we've sometimes seen this in the witchy community, whatever platform, where it's you've got witches who are trying to say your way of practicing is wrong and that's not right. And the book says to do it this way. And I follow the book, so you should too, and everybody else should too. And we've had these discussions in the past, you know, the whole, should I stay in my own lane? What should I do? And we are individual peoples. Even if we take away the label of witch, the label of gay, straight, whatever, take away all the labels and just your name, you are an individual person with your own unique thoughts and expressions and your own history and your own everything. So your witchcraft, the practice of your craft is always going to be unique because you're putting yourself into it.
I agree. It's back to that hand.
Well, it's about time you agree with something.
No, I've been agreeing with you, but I also disagree with you, and that's what makes the conversations interesting.
Yay.
I know. Yay. So we've been on for about an hour and 15. I was thinking, last 15 minutes, does anybody have any questions for us before we say bye-bye? Anybody? Questions?
Well, people have to have questions.
Questions?
who am I? I'm Captain Catherine Janeway of the USS Voyager, and we are not here on a peaceful mission. We will assimilate you.
No, we are not going to assimilate.
You must practice the craft our way. JK.
Someone's sending me secret messages.
Ooh.
Who's sending me secret messages?
What are these? I want secret messages. People should send me secret messages.
It's my friend. My secret friend. Becoming Witch. You can get this on Amazon. If you want an autographed copy, contact me and I will see what I can do if you're in the US. If you want to pay for shipping and you're outside of the US, I'd be more than happy to send you an autographed copy.
And once my copy gets here, there will be a series next year reviewing the entire book. 13 episodes, and we'll go through the exercises together.
Yay. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited. So excited. Yes. Any questions? No questions?
Questions, comments, concerns, death threats, I'll take them all.
Yeah.
I've been getting a lot of
death threats. I don't want death threats.
Well, I said I'll take them all.
Adam can take the death threats, not me.
I've been getting comments a lot on my videos. A couple I've deleted, but they're like these links to these love sites or whatever. Like people will just post them, or like 2 comments have appeared that I've left up where it's like somebody will be like, "Oh, my husband was cheating on me, and I found this man who did this magic for me, and you can contact him at this number, and this is his name." And I'm like, and I reply to those, and I'm like, "Thanks for leaving your personal information. I'm just gonna leave this comment here."
Loving kindness. Anyone work with Thoth? I used to years ago. Thoth was someone I did work with, but I don't work with him anymore. Again, I'm kind of in deity limbo right now.
Somebody asked what my vape.
What is your vape flavor?
It's called Coil Killas, and it's called Fury. It tastes like a pina colada.
Pina colada. Cindy B. A story about the monkey. He made reference to the monkey paw.
Now, when he says here, the moral of the story, be specific in your petitions, I agree with that. But I also agree that even if your petition isn't precisely perfectly worded, as Lunar Wisdom has said, if you're perfectly aligned in everything that you want and you're internally, like that true will, even if you don't write it down properly, that true will come forward when you're putting intentions in. Because you'll be visualizing exactly what it is that you want, and you'll be calling upon the deity and saying, "This is my petition." There's a lot of times where my petitions will be like, "I just want a job," but the spirits will know the type of job that I want. So yes, do be specific, but also know that even if you're not super specific, as long as you're aligned in exactly what you want, your true desire, your true will, and you've managed to do the mundane, the internal, everything, it will manifest.
Yeah, it really depends. So there's pros and cons with being specific, and there's pros and cons with being more vague. I mean, and like Adam said, yeah, if you are in alignment and you have a good working relationship between you and the spirits that you work with, then they understand what it is you're looking for. And even with your visualizations, you can be very specific and very vague. It depends on where you are in your own life, where you are in the practice of your craft, where you are in exactly what it is you're looking for. I mean, I would suggest that, if you if you're looking for money, say just a prosperity spell, you want wealth, that's one way to look at it. I just want more money. Then that is very vague. You can get money in very different ways. But
a loan could come through, a credit card could appear in the mail. Whereas if you're being very specific,
I want money for rent specifically, that's different.
That's why I'm never super specific. I'm a little vague. So like when I do a prosperity spell, I'll be like, I want money to keep the roof over my head, to keep the bills paid, and to keep the car running. And that might be super specific to some people, but to me, that's not super specific, because I'm not saying where I want that money to come from. And so like if I were to say I need a raise at my job to pay the bills, to pay the rent, right? Like that's being a little more specific. And so that maybe that spell will manifest and I'll get a raise. Whereas sometimes if you're too specific, what could happen is maybe you only get rent money, but then the next day you're like, oh, the electricity bill's due and I totally forgot about it and I should have asked for money for that. So that's where doing the mundane beforehand, gathering, let's say you need money for bills, gathering all the bills, gathering the amount of money that you need, and then doing the work. Because if you're only thinking about one thing, that one thing will come through, even if in the back of your mind you were like, oh, and I need money for this too.
Right. I think that's part of the preparation of what you're going to do. I'm a big individual who believes in preparing my spell. So, doing a spell, if I'm actually going to cast a spell, takes time to prepare it. I'm not one who generally does the spell the day after I think of doing it, unless it's something. Unless it's something that really needs to be addressed at that moment. The situation with my daughter and work, it happened that morning. That spell was cast by that night. But I mean, if it's something that I'm planning for, I know my husband and I want to go away for a weekend and we need some extra cash, then we're not going to go this weekend. Let's go in 2 or 3 weekends. That gives me time to prepare and to get my mind in that, to get the energy built, to get the momentum going towards casting this spell. So it really depends.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the complete opposite, where it's like, if I want to go on a vacation, say this weekend, and I need money for it, I'll do the spell on Monday. And if it's not there by Friday, then I'll just accept that. And I'll end up going anyways if I can afford it. I did want to point out Raven Toe's comment, though.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's the last part where it's like, and the means to obtain the open to the interpretation chosen deity. I would be cautious with that, because if you are leaving the how-to up to the spirits, that might backfire on you, especially if you're looking for something that's going to be long-term, where the money's coming in all the time, and you just leave it up to the deities to determine how. You might end up on welfare for a very long time, right? So that's where being kind of specific in how you want the money to come through, right? So let's say you're wanting to buy a house, but you don't have a job, right? So, and you say, I need money to buy the house. I'm going to leave it up to you to how that money comes in. Somebody in your family might die and leave you a crap ton of money to buy that house. Whereas if you said something like, I want to buy a house and I need a job to get there, and you start doing the mundane and the true will and all of that fun stuff, then it gives them more of a specific direction to go in. Whereas opposed to being vague and leaving it open to the spirits may backfire on you, or may only work in the short term.
At some point, I disagree with that. And this is why I disagree with that. With the idea that I ask for money, I'm not specific as where it's going to come from, and then the deity will kill my grandmother to give me the money.
I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I'm just saying that any number of things could happen to get you that money.
Right. And I agree with the fact that any number of things can happen, but I also agree with, again, it goes right back to living towards the intention of our witch self. If we are honest and we have done the internal work and we have said, I want money, then because I am living in alignment with my true witch self or my true will, then I will be following the path that is ultimately going to lead me to the money. And my deities, if I work with deities, or the spirits that I work with, will help guide me along the path to attain that money. And then my spell work is just sort of the push towards that, where I'm going anyway.
And what about your thoughts on, like, if you're working with a trickster deity? Like, trickster deities and trickster entities, especially if you work with demons, you will run across tricksters all the time, mostly because they're sent to test you. As in, like, for example, working with Belith, for me, there's a plague doctor that always appears and tries to torment me and all of that fun stuff. And they will try and jump in and try and screw with the manifestation. And that's just a way of testing me to see if I will remain true to exactly what I want before they hand it off to Belith in this case. Sometimes I found with trickster entities, if you work with them directly, they may kind of mess with the situation because there could be a lesson to be taught along the way. That's just how, that's based off of my experience, though. So it might be different for everybody.
Well, number one, my definition of a demon, I'm sure, and angels are different than yours. Deity, for me, because in my perspective and my belief, is a higher vibrational frequency spiritual being. Deities are, for me, in a different category than demons and angels. So from my perspective, demons are more akin and more in alignment with human experiences, even though they're not human and never were human. I actually, honestly, I put, for me, demons sort of on the same level as fae, which they tend to be more trickster, more test. They test you. They're a little closer to humanity than angels and gods. Okay. So, but in any way, if any deity or spiritual entity is testing you or trying to distract you or are trying to influence you to stay the course, they are still in alignment with your true self, your witch self.
Yeah.
Because part of that testing is to get you refined, to get your will stronger, to get your focus. That's part of that. So they understand your end game, even if you in this moment don't know what the end game is, which many of us don't. Many of us really truly understand our end game, that we truly are struggling on a daily basis to keep our witch self in focus, while doing everything that we're meant to do to have a life experience, in the physical.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to the definition that you threw out there, for when I did the Dancing with Demons series, one of the core concepts from there was that demons themselves will always want to work with humans. It doesn't matter the type of demon that you want to work with. And the reason is because they know we're going to keep coming back. We're never satisfied with what we have. That's one of the reasons why they love to work with us so much and why they want to be a part of our spellcraft, should we choose to work with them. So, for example, when I work with Boone, he knows I'm going to come back because the job might disappear in 6 to 8 months or whatever the case may be for some unexplained reason, which usually the Morrigan tells me about months before and I completely ignore. But they know that you're never going to be satisfied. I think that's one of the reasons why, and in my opinion, why we're constantly in today's age casting magic, because we're never satisfied with what we've managed to manifest. Yes, we might have done a spell to get a job, and 24 hours later that job comes. And now we're probably thinking, okay, great, I'm going to do a spell to get me a new car. I'm going to do a spell to get me a new man. And maybe that all works. But when you never stop being a witch, but when do you stop relying on the craft for everything and using it for the things that you actually need? Does that make sense?
Well, as witch, again, witch is the witch is who I am. It's my perspective. It's how I think, how I act, how I behave. So I'm always manipulating magic. I'm living in alignment, or to the best of my ability, with my witch self, which means I'm always relying on that power. But if you're talking about like the skill of crafting, walking to my altar to specifically cast a spell or do a magical working, that is not as frequent as it once was, because I'm closer to where I should be.
Yes, I'm talking more specifically about the witches that we used to hear about, especially on YouTube, the altar witches, the ones who run to the altar for every little single issue. And there's no issue in doing that. However, there actually is an issue in doing that, because
there's no issue, but there is an issue. No, I think what you mean to say is, maybe it's not an issue, but I think that those individuals should take a step back and do some internal working.
Well, there's also another thing there. So I read this a long time ago, and I've got to find the book again. But essentially what it was saying is that A witch who lives at their altar, say 24/7, 365, is somebody who has 2 feet in the magical world. And that can lead to all kinds of issues, including opening yourself up for attacks, opening yourself up for spiritual takeovers, possessions, so on and so forth. Witches who have 1 foot in the magical world and 1 foot in the mundane world are more balanced. And witches who are able to, as you had said, maybe not be casting all the time because they're more closer to their truer self and their truer will and their desire. I just lost my train of thought.
Well, my thought is that witch who is standing at their altar 24/7, who have 2 feet in the magical world and are not in the physical, they're not living, they're like,
yeah, they're not balanced.
Well, my thought is they're not only balanced, but what are they running away from?
Exactly.
What are they running from? Because I can tell you, as a young adult, I spent 24/7 in the magical, I will say, in the unseen realms. I was trying to escape physicality. I was not balanced. I can describe to you my existence in that realm. That's not a place to be if you're a human being. If you're a human being, you're a physical being. You're physical and ethereal. So, as witch, we want to have 1 foot in the unseen and 1 foot in the physical so that we're able to take from there to bring to here to have a life experience that is pleasing and that we're learning from, and we're growing and expanding and becoming.
And we're, I saw what you did there. And we're also so where I think I was going with that is that you're not balanced. You're also, like you said, you're potentially running away from something. And when you put both feet in the magical world, like we've all done, I'm sure when we were younger, you tend to really quickly see just how unbalanced you are because you're running to the altar for everything. Maybe it's a noisy neighbor, maybe it's the person at your work. And sometimes we have to be human and we have to deal with things as a human being. We can't always be working magic because sometimes, and I have many videos on this, there are some times where magic can't help you.
I disagree. I am always working magic. Define magic. Manipulating the energies to create a change in my reality in the way that I want.
I'm talking about going to the altar.
Okay.
Are you going? So let's say I'm going to throw kind of a harsh example at you for a second.
Go ahead.
Go with it. If your mother died tomorrow, would you run to the altar to do some kind of grievance spell to remove the grief from you, or would you process that grief like a human being?
I'd process the grief as a witch. Is a witch a human being?
Okay, but that's okay. Whether you're processing it as a witch or a human, are you running to the altar to deal with that situation because you don't want to feel that pain and that loss?
Well, no. But again, that's running away from something.
Exactly. That's where magic can't help you.
But magic is helping me. No. So I guess I mean magic and the perspective.
That's not what I'm talking about, though. What I'm talking about is running to the altar. Yes, you can be magical in everything that you do and manipulate the energies and everything, but it's physically going to the altar and saying, I don't want to deal with the loss of my mother, so I call upon the spirits and the deities to take that pain away. You are running away from something. That magic may not work. Dealing with it in terms of shadow work is a completely different subject as opposed to running to the altar and calling upon something to take away that pain when you should be dealing with it.
That's a judgment, though. Judgment. You harsh. You can't tell me what I should and shouldn't do.
That's facts.
As a witch, if I wouldn't, because it's not what I do, but me in the past would. I would go to my altar, cast a spell to suppress the grief. And it works. It works. Because
it never worked for me.
It works. But for me at that time, that was necessary. There was a period in my life where I was the witch I would advise everybody not to be at this point in my life.
Do you remember the old Tequila video where she was talking about how she was like cursing everybody and hexing
but
everybody?
I hear people talk about it. So from hearing others' perspectives, yes, that was the witch I was. I was the witch. Oh God,
Angry.
Do I want to share this?
Well, you don't have to share everything.
I was the witch that manipulated. I manipulated people. People were pawns to be manipulated and to be played with and to be used as minions. Yeah, they were. And I did it. And I did it successfully, looking back. If there was something and anger was the source of my power. And it was power and it was heady. And from the outside, people who didn't know me thought, wow, she's got her shit together. I did not have my shit together. Are you kidding me? All of it was tucked away and pushed away, and I was always projecting. I was never receiving. I was always projecting my energy outward and doing what I wanted to do and manipulating things so that I thought I was in a good place. But it's not. Eventually that can't sustain itself. That anger, that type of fire cannot sustain itself.
No, it can't. And that's let me ask you something. Did you find that during that phase in your life that Magick was truly helping you? Like looking back on it, do you find that Magick was helping you?
It was helping me in that moment. And here's the kicker. I wasn't identifying as witch at that time.
Oh, okay.
I didn't understand what it was that I was doing. But all I knew is that I had my shit together.
See, that's when things can get
top of the world.
That's when things can get dangerous because while your experience might have played out that way, somebody else was a similar kind of situation and used magic in a similar kind of fashion. It might have completely backfired for them and completely just devastated their life for whatever reason. And that's where I come up and say that in those situations, well, yes, one could argue magic can help me in these situations. That's when I say, no, your emotions are out of control. You're out of sync. You're not aligned properly with your energies, your deities, your spirits. So you're just wildly casting magic. And sure, it might work. It might. You might not feel any pain or misery, but what about 6 months down the road when you keep doing things like this? And like you said, it's not sustainable. So you get tired, you get worn out, you get depressed, you get miserable. And that's why I say magic can't help you, because you need to do the internal work to figure out, why am I feeling this way?
Right. But and I agree, but there are times in our lives where if I were to, at that time, try to do internal work, I was not in a place. You know, you have to be in a receptive place to be able to do that internal work for it to really help you. It's like taking a child who doesn't want to speak to a therapist and putting them in the therapist's office. If the child doesn't speak, therapy isn't going to help. No matter what, that therapist cannot force that child to speak. So the individual needs to be in a place where they're able and willing to do the internal work. If they're not willing to do it, then it's not going to be helpful. So at that time in my life, the ability to manipulate the energies and the necessity for me to repress the feelings were important for me in order to get to a spot where I could then let everything out. I wasn't in a safe place.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is the other thing I wanted to bring up. So I brought this up before where I asked if the craft only attracts broken people. Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that you're broken.
I'm not broken now. I'm one of those vases that has the gold etching to fill the cracks, you know?
Yeah. I've noticed this with like Ember Honeyraven and her Patreon and her stories that she shared there, and some of the conversations we've had and conversations I've had with other witches, where it seems like at one point in their life or another, it was just complete shit, whatever the reason may be. And I feel like the craft can help, but it's up to you. And I think from my personal experience, I was never ready to deal with the emotional baggage and trauma and all of that fun stuff, which I've talked about numerous times, including the Grimoire season 1. Please check it out. And so for me, it was the Morrigan coming into my life, because for her, she forces me to look at these darker aspects. And maybe that's not the right case for everybody. Maybe you don't want to deal with that. But I think on some level, we have to realize that in order to become aligned with our true self, whatever that may be, you have to fix yourself. And sometimes you can't fix yourself. And that's, again, where Magick sometimes can't help, because maybe you're dealing with really dark, dramatic childhood trauma that if you think about it, if you start remembering it, you might start drinking or doing drugs to suppress it or whatever. And that might be the case where you need a therapist to help you. So it's not necessarily that Magick cannot be used in those situations. It's that it goes back to the mundane. Okay, so I don't want to deal with this dark, scary childhood situation on my own because I don't know how. So maybe, you know, you're ready and you're open to talking about it. So you'll see a therapist. And maybe while you're seeing the therapist, in the back end, you're doing some magic to help bring, to help release some of those issues, right? So it's not that Magick can never help you. It's that you have to help yourself, in my opinion, before going to the altar and asking for help.
I guess my biggest with that is that Magick can help, but Magick isn't the only help. I would agree with. I mean, if you're dealing with mental illness, you do need a licensed therapist. If you're dealing with a health issue, you want to see a physician. But again, being witch is more than just going to the altar. Being witch is more than just doing spells. It is a perspective. It is a lifestyle. It is the way we view, speak, think, act. So Magick is always a part of what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what I'm speaking, what I'm behaving. So I can't. So anytime I go see a physician or go see a therapist, Magick is a part of that. It's not separate. So that's where I'm like, oh, Magick can help. I mean, it's how I live my life. It's how I view life and death and everything in between. So,
yes, but you also kind of realize that not everybody is lunar wisdom.
Well, not everybody is witch either.
Exactly. Not everybody is witch and not everybody is lunar wisdom. So like the way that I would process things is that I would deal with the mundane first and the internal stuff and then go to the altar. Whereas some people might consider everything that they do to be magical, whereas I don't. And that's totally valid.
I mean,
but the other thing is that I think a lot of people
isn't something you can separate from yourself. I don't believe witch is something
it's not that you're separating. So this leads to an interesting topic.
Really, I'm going to have to stop soon.
No.
We can do this again. We can definitely schedule this again. And I'm only saying this because I have people coming home soon and they're going to be walking through the door right behind me.
Okay, let me just make this really quick point then. So a lot of people can't distinguish between what it is to be witch and what it is to be practicing the craft. And they intertwine those two. And I do that as we
should talk about that at our next one. So let me write this down. So we don't forget what our next topic is going to be. So we're going to talk about what was it that you said?
Basically, there's a distinction between being witch and the craft, and people mix those. I do it. Everybody does it.
Being witch and practicing witchcraft?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about that next time, and we'll schedule a time where we can have another discussion. So, yeah, thank you all for joining us. This was fun. and we're
It was
just
2
getting
hours.
into the nitty gritty stuff. But we'll talk again.
We're getting into the good stuff.
I know. Adam and I will schedule another. It'll probably be another Sunday because this is a good day for me.
Yeah, that works for me. Wait, it's Saturday today, isn't it?
Is it Saturday?
Yeah, it's Saturday.
Oh, well, Saturday is good for me too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Saturday is good for me too. Maybe in a couple of weeks. We'll have to look at the calendar. Anyway. Oh, it's Saturday. It's not Sunday. Anyway, okay. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to check out my book on Amazon, Becoming Witch, Back to the Basics. And check out Adam's channel.
Yeah, subscribe.
Okay, all. I love you. Blessed be everyone.